Well, greetings from Ignatius House. My name is Father Peter Fink, and I'm happy to be with you once again in this time of prayer. The reading from St. Paul to the Romans is for me a challenge. As I read the Atlanta Journal and Constitution and the New York Times each morning, all creation is groaning in labor even now. The war in Ukraine, the investigations into the January 6th attack on the Capitol, the reaction to the Roe Wade decision and the ongoing clash between the rights of women's health and the rights of the unborn child. These are just a few of the sufferings of this present world, groaning for redemption. It's hard to realize sometimes the glory that will be revealed to us when we're faced with all the darkness in this world. It's hard to imagine what Paul calls the hope that creation itself will be set free from slavery to corruption. I can't help wondering where and when the glorious freedom of the children of God will appear. But Paul is not speaking as a philosopher, weighing the promise of good over against the existence all around us, the existence of evil. He's not speaking in metaphor, showing how the inevitable outcome of suffering will soon yield later goodness. Paul is so completely embraced within himself of the power and mercy of God that he knows the sufferings of this world are, in his words, nothing compared to the glory that will be revealed to us. Paul is speaking about hope. He's not speaking about victory or defeat. Hope takes us beyond victory and defeat. Hope takes us to the one who is before us, drawing us and all creation into the world of his love. Elsewhere, Paul put it, "Eye has not seen, nor has ear heard, nor has it entered into the human heart what God has prepared for those who love him." 1 Corinthians 2:9. He's not being silly. He's not holding out to us an empty promise to soothe us, or in my case, to soothe me as I read the New York papers, the New York and Atlanta papers. He's inviting you and me deeply into that world of trust that was his. He is inviting us into the love of God. St. Thomas Merton, in his brief remark, gives a clear distinction between us human folk and the rest of creation. At least insofar as we know, nothing that is not human has the problem. The world is as God created it. Quote, "God makes them what they are without consulting them. They are perfectly satisfied." But we human folk have freedom. And the sufferings of this present world didn't just happen. More than we realize, we chose them. The war in Ukraine could have unfolded quite differently with different choices. The disaster of January 6th could have unfolded quite differently with a whole set of different choices. The reaction in the wake of Roe Wade could certainly be less volatile if church and state found ways to respect both the health and care of the mother and the life of the child within her, in a way that allowed the child to be born and both mother and child appropriately and adequately taken care of. Choices are involved, and the human hope is that the choices we are invited to are choices towards peace, towards justice, towards honest care, towards love. Recently, I was reading a book by David Brooks called The Second Mountain, The Quest for a Moral Life. It's an interesting book that gives some human witness to the groaning of all creation. The first mountain, as Brooks notes, is about the ego and all the things that the self-centered person seeks: career, fame, riches, honor, power. That mountain, he shows, will sooner or later become empty and unsatisfying. Something will happen, and then the person falls from that first mountain into the valley below. And many find themselves lost in that valley, and too frequently choose all sorts of disastrous choices. But there are some who leave the valley and the world of the ego and enter into a world of generous giving. And that is the second mountain. Now, what follows in the book are stories of men and women who think now of others rather than themselves. People who work for the poor, the abandoned, those on the fringe, people who need. It would be impossible to begin naming the many ventures in this short reference, but Brooks' task is to invite us into a world where the spirit Paul talks about is alive, stretching the human imagination in so many directions, all leading to love, to hate, not hatred, to care, not disrespect, to life, not to death. I must admit I had several reactions to the book. He cites many authors, and I kept thinking, he's read an awful lot of books and essays, hasn't he? But that's the evil spirit. The good spirit shows me that what he is doing is inviting us into a world of love. There are so many wonderful and caring people on this second mountain, and we are asked to join them in their caring venture. And isn't that what Paul is talking about? We also groan within ourselves as we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. Another of my intellectual heroes is the Scottish philosopher John Mcmurray, who addressed this same reality, ego versus self-giving. In his classic work, The Form of the Personal, Mcmurray moves from the claim of the ego into the world of personal relationships. The first part of his work is called The Self as Agent, where he fights all forms of the ego trip and their threat to isolationism. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." But Mcmurray says rather, "I do." And thinking is one of the things that humans do, but humans do much more than simply think. Self as agent calls us out of that self-centered isolation into a world of action and people and a much truer understanding of who we are. The second part of his work is called Persons in Relation. And there he reminds us that people do not exist for themselves. People exist with others. And much like Brooks, Mcmurray looks at these human relationships and sees them as the path to love. Even our relationship with God is named a personal relationship. God, who relates to us as person to person, summons us into his own wonderful love. I'm struck by the starkness of Merton's observation that we are at liberty to be real or unreal, who I am or who I pretend to be. These are our choices, and we make them every day. But the choices we make cannot be made without some kind of cost to them. If you're false, if you choose to live in a false understanding of yourself, you may never find truth when you start looking for it and when you need it most. And now, what about God? How does God get into this? Well, Paul continues, the Spirit itself intercedes with inexpressible groaning. God is with us in the world groaning for its completion. We're not alone. The love of God calls us and works with us to lead us into his own love. We can join the Second Mountain folk, reach out to anyone who needs our care and help, and join with God on bringing this world to redemption. Or not. We can join John Mcmurray and pursue the love of others rather than the path of hatred and disrespect. Or not. We can listen to Merton, to be ourselves, over against all pretenses. Or not. Or we can simply follow Jesus' own invitation. Love one another as I love you. We can do that. Or not. Well, blessings, everybody. Join with me, join with all creation, groaning for completion, that God's path to love will finally be realized. And for this weekend, happy independence for those who treasure our democracy in America. Peace.